the enormous respect I have for conservative Republican governors who stepped up and issued mandates for wearing masks. In North Dakota, the idea, one of the leaders in this area has been the Republican governor in Ohio. And in addition to the folks who've already been leading, like the governor of Michigan. The idea that the president's now remaining advisor on COVID is saying that they should resist. What the hell's the matter with these guys? What is the matter with them? Resist. Every major individual of any consequence in the health field is saying we can save 100,000 lives just between now and January 21st by wearing these masks. It's going to take a while for the vaccine to be able to be available, distributed, and get to people. We're talking about 350 to 400,000 people dying? What are they doing? It's totally irresponsible. Irresponsible. And so I compliment the governors who stepped forward, who have been stepping forward, but also the Republican governors who stepped forward. I left out the governor of Utah, very conservative state, governor of North Dakota, and all the Democratic governors have been doing it all along. I just ask a rhetorical question. Do you guys understand this? Does anybody understand why a governor would turn this into a political statement? It's about patriotism. It's about being patriotic. It's about saving lives, for real. This is not hyperbole. It's about being patriotic. And I think you're seeing more and more as this god-awful virus continues to spread almost unabated that that governors are stepping up. There's nothing macho about not wearing a mask.
Any last modicum of patience Joe Biden might have had for Trump's leading coronavirus advisor just went out the window. I should mention too, right off the bat, that Scott Atlas is not an infectious disease expert. He's not an epidemiologist, he's not a public health expert. The guy is a radiologist whose position on coronavirus is to achieve herd immunity. Herd immunity would effectively mean that upwards of 70% of the population would be infected with the virus, and that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Americans would die en route to achieving that figure. That's who Trump has in charge. Atlas surged into the news this weekend after Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer enacted reasonable restrictions, which included halting in-person learning for high schools and colleges and closing indoor dining in bars, theaters, stadiums, and casinos, which might have something to do with the fact that not only are Michigan's cases skyrocketing, but cases in the US have reached astronomical levels, as high as 180,000 new cases a day, blowing the second wave of the virus out of the water as we head into winter. Gretchen Whitmer said, "We are in the worst moments of this pandemic to date. The situation has never been more dire. We are at the precipice and we need to take some action because as the weather gets colder and people spend more time indoors, the virus will spread, more people will get sick, and there will be more fatalities." And yet in response to what is clearly an emergency, Scott Atlas took to Twitter and wrote, "The only way this stops is if people rise up. You get what you accept. Hashtag freedom matters. Hashtag step up." In other words, the guy purportedly in charge of containing coronavirus responded to a governor taking steps to contain coronavirus by urging people to revolt against that governor. I did mention that this is the guy Trump put in charge of containing the virus, right? And after a very expected outcry over his statement, Atlas again took to Twitter writing, "Hey, I never was talking at all about violence. People vote, people peacefully protest. Never would I endorse or incite violence. Never." Right. He was just telling people to vote on November 15th, almost 2 weeks after the election, meaning either he was preparing people for midterms in 2022, or he's completely full of it and just offered whatever lazy, bad faith excuse he could cook up. Take all the time you need with that one. The simple truth is that Atlas's messaging wasn't a mistake. It was on par with every other message coming out of this administration. Dating all the way back to April, Trump himself tweeted "Liberate Michigan" in response to common sense steps taken by Governor Whitmer to slow the spread of this deadly contagion. He did the same for Virginia and the same for Minnesota. And ironically enough, while Trump positioned himself against every single one of these states' Democratic governors for taking action against the virus, Trump ended up losing every single one of these states in the last election. So I guess you could say that when Trump told those states to liberate themselves, By voting against him, that's exactly what they did. What we need now is not some clown telling people to protest common sense steps to keep us alive. It is to contain the spread so that our hospital system doesn't get overrun. We've been through this before. This isn't new. We should know this by now. We need to help our doctors and nurses, not fight them, not make their lives more difficult. And the first person who should know that is the head of the coronavirus task force. And frankly, I cannot believe that I actually have to say that, and it makes me sick that I do. I get that Trump's whole messaging apparatus was to convince people that masks and social distancing are an affront to your freedom, but you know what's really an affront to your freedom? You know what's really gonna stop you from basking in liberty? A ventilator. The fact is that abiding by public health measures doesn't mean you're not free. It doesn't mean you're succumbing to communism or socialism or Marxism or whatever else Fox News has convinced you is taking over the country. It means that you're helping people survive. We have rules in a society that help people live. For example, everyone has to wear seatbelts, and somehow we haven't devolved into Venezuela. Imagine that. Like Biden said, wearing a mask is patriotic. It is helping people live. Other Americans, your own family and friends. I would imagine that not killing the people around you is pretty patriotic. The fact is that this isn't even up for debate. Wearing masks is not an issue that we have to wait for the science on. We know that it's effective. For all those Trump supporters waiting for a vaccine, you should acknowledge the fact that if you want a vaccine because it'll protect you, masks already do that. They reduce the likelihood of transmission exponentially, especially if everyone wears them. So you can't hail one solution to contain the spread while condemning another solution to contain the spread and expect to be taken seriously. But at this point, it's already abundantly clear that we shouldn't expect any constructive guidance on coronavirus from this administration. All we've gotten from this White House over the last 9 months is denialism and lies. Promises that it'll go away with the heat and that it was contained and that cases were going down to zero. Assurances that anyone who wants a test could get a test, even when that wasn't remotely true. Assurances that we had plenty of PPE while doctors and nurses were showing up to shifts wearing garbage bags. We had Trump hawking miracle cures that didn't work and spouting nonsense about disinfectant that left poison control centers flooded with calls. He held campaign rallies even after his own friend and advisor Herman Cain contracted coronavirus at his Tulsa rally and died. He had campaign rallies after half of his administration, including himself and his own wife and his own son, caught coronavirus at a super spreader event at the White House. Every single step of the way, Trump's handling of this pandemic has been a clinic in mismanagement. Donald Trump is responsible for the deaths of 250,000 Americans. He's responsible for millions of jobs lost and an unemployment rate nearly double what it was when he took office. And the fact that he continues to surround himself with people like Scott Atlas is all the proof you need that not only has he failed to learn from his mistakes, but he's hell-bent on making more. If you like this video, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I take a deep dive into the week's most important stories and interview major players in politics, including Kamala Harris, Katie Porter, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Eric Swalwell, Mary Trump, Al Franken, Cory Booker, and many, many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.